I'm really glad to be here today. I'll share my screen in just a minute, and I've got some PowerPoint slides to show you. But first, I just wanted to show you something I grew. So evidence that helping plants grow, you need light. So these are both radishes. They were planted 4 weeks ago, just after Christmas, and they've been growing in the same greenhouse, but this one's been growing under shade. This one's been growing under supplemental light. It's important when we talk about light to realize that it is basically radiant energy that the plant is going to take and store as sugars, stored chemical energy. So if we want plants to grow better, we're going to need to give them more energy. And that's important because we want to think about light differently than we usually do. Plants see light differently than people do. Potatoes aside, plants don't have eyes. So we are going to want to make sure that we provide the plants with the light that they need. That light is essential for their growth and development, and they experience light not as illumination, but as energy. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about what kind of lights or what kind of plants you might want to be growing around the house. Most of our homes have plenty of light for a few house plants, but there are some situations where we're going to want to add extra light for those plants. Starting plants, very young plants, bedding plant seedlings. You're probably thinking now about what you want to put outside in the spring if you've got vegetable transplants, or maybe you're going to try a few cuttings and make some more houseplants. All of those will benefit from some extra light, a little bit more than we get in most of our houses. Growing leafy greens, if you want to try growing some arugula, some lettuce, some basil, again, those plants are going to need just a little bit more than is available in most of our houses. Flowering fruiting plants. These are energy hogs. If you want to induce flowers or fruit, that reproduction of the plant is extremely energy intensive. And if you want to produce fruiting plants like the tomatoes that we have here, if you have visions of citrus trees in Wisconsin, you're going to need a lot of extra light. Finally, you may find that for certain houseplants, there's just not enough light. Maybe you've got an interior wall where you want to place a plant, so you're away from a window, or you've just got some plants that are not looking their best. Often adding some extra light can benefit them and improve their health. As I said, when we talk about light, the most common measurements that you're going to interact with are measures of illumination or brightness. So if you look at a standard light bulb, you're going to see readings in what are called lux or lumens or foot candles. These are common measurements used by photographers and architects, engineers, and they're also used in many plant care resources. So if you purchase a book talking about plants, particularly an older one, you'll see measurements of light in these units. They are, however, anthropocentric. They are looking at light the way that we do. But we use these units because they're convenient, they're in a lot of resources, and the meters to measure them are actually pretty inexpensive. The downside is that a light meter measures brightness in the way that humans experience light and according to human eye sensitivity. So it's focusing on the wavelengths of light, the colors of light that are most seen by people. And those aren't necessarily the wavelengths or colors of light that are best used by plants. So it's not measuring exactly what we really want to know about. However, it's a convenient unit of measurement, and it's still used extensively by plant care resources and by lighting manufacturers. So it's important to know what it is and how to understand it. A better method of measuring light is energy, irradiance, that radiant energy that is received by the leaf that it uses for photosynthesis. And those units are in energy measurements, watts or micromoles. A quantum meter, rather than a light meter, measures that light, that radiant energy. PAR for short, it stands for photosynthetically active radiation, and it measures the light energy between 400 and 700 nanometers, basically the visible light spectrum. But rather than focusing on the light that our eyes experience best, it focuses on the light that the plants most want to use for photosynthesis. This unit of measurement is used by plant scientists and professional growers today because it's a more accurate measurement of energy, specifically the energy that plants use. So this picture here shows what seems to be a dimly lit room. We really can't see very well under those pinkish purple lights. And a light meter would give you a very low reading in this room because a light meter is going to look at mostly green and yellow wavelengths, which is where we see better. But the plants in there, as you can see, are growing very happily and very healthily. Plants use red and blue wavelengths mostly for their photosynthesis, which is why you'll see that sort of pinky purple glow from a lot of the new LED lights. They are putting out light specifically where the plants want to use it, not necessarily where we want to see it. And that's why even what appears to be a dimly lit room is high in energy. So I sort of synthesized this down into lumens. That measure of brilliance or brightness is for looking at watts, our energy. So for plant scientists and professional growers, we're going to look at the energy readings. Often you will see those listed as PPFD, photosynthetic photon flux density. We'll get to that in a little bit, what the difference is. So the first question to ask yourself is, how much light are my plants getting? Again, if we're looking at irradiance, the amount of light energy received by the plant, the amount of light energy varies by how far it is away from the plant light source. So the closer the plant is to the light source, the greater the intensity is going to be. A beam of light is going to spread out and reduce in strength the further away you are from the source. Fluorescent and LED fixtures can be placed very close to plants, which is a benefit. Some of the older high-intensity discharge fixtures, like high-pressure sodium, or even the old incandescent lights, put out a lot of heat when they put out light. So they can't be put very close to the plants or they'll crisp them up and dry them out. So one of the benefits of fluorescent and the newer LED fixtures is that they can be very close to the light, so you can have a moderately powered light source, but still get a lot of light because the plant can be very close to it. So keep in mind that the closer the plant is to the source, the higher the light, and the further away the plant is from the light source, the lower the intensity. The other thing to think about is that the amount of energy received by the plant, when we take a light measurement, that's really a snapshot. But the plant is going to be exposed to light for the full day, however many hours that is. So we can multiply the irradiance, the amount of light energy, by the photoperiod, the duration of exposure. Leaving the lights on longer gives the plant more energy. If you remember that photons can be considered little packets, if you get 5 packets at a time, but for 5 hours, that's 25 packets, or you can get all 25 packets in 1 hour with a more intense light source. So as a homeowner, this means that leaving the lights on longer can increase the amount of energy that your plants are getting. And adding a timer to a grow light is an inexpensive way to increase your light intensity without maybe buying a more high energy light and light fixture. 24-hour exposure isn't healthy for all plants. Leafy greens are going to get grumpy and a lot of flowering plants are going to get grumpy if you leave the lights on all day. So a timer definitely will help you, and probably a 16 to 18-hour day is sufficient for many of our plants and can give you that extra energy without increasing the immediate energy output, just by accumulating it for a longer period of time over the course of the day. To measure light energy, we can buy specialized meters. A light meter, as I said, is used by architects and engineers, also by photographers if you take photos. But we all carry a camera around with us, and that camera on our phone has a light sensor. And there are phone applications that can basically convert the reading from your light sensor in your camera into one of those light measures that we can use for growing plants. A light meter app, as I said, a light meter can be purchased by photographers. They're also marketed to architects and builders. But a light meter app you can probably download for free, and it will measure brightness, lumens in lux or foot candles. Lux and foot candles are basically the same thing. It's just foot candles versus lux is lumens per square meter. So you're just looking at English versus metric to compare lux to foot candles. And I would honestly say for most houseplant or homeowner applications, your readings in brightness is going to be good enough. You can estimate from that what you would need. It's really the commercial growers and the plant scientists who want that extra accuracy from the energy readings. So I've got a picture here. This is a phone app that I downloaded, and it's got a warning here. It tells me that my diffuser is missing. So you will need to adapt your phone just a little bit. You can see in the top of the picture here, there's a hot spot in this reading. What it's looking for is a diffuser, something to kind of smooth that out. So now I've lost the reading because I just basically put a little piece of paper cover over my camera on my phone. It just needed to diffuse the light. Otherwise, you get a hot spot and the reading can be inaccurate. So that's what it's looking for. You will have to adapt your phone a little bit, but it's just a specially folded piece of paper. If you want to convert your lumens into photosynthetic photon flux density, PPFD, which is the measurement that plant scientists are going to use, you just have to do the math. There's a link that has popped up on the bottom of the screen to a calculator. However, that conversion factor is going to vary by light source. So you need to know what your light source is in order to get an accurate conversion. Electric lights, you know how things look different under a fluorescent light or LED lights or even outside, and that light source is going to vary. It has to do with the color of the light. So you need to know what the light source is in order to make an accurate conversion. There are also grow light apps, but these are marketed to indoor growers, and usually they're available either for purchase or extra features will need to be purchased. So a light meter app, I think, is perfectly useful for most homeowners. If you do want to invest in something a little higher, you could purchase one of the grow light apps. Mainly what that is going to do is it has those calculations built into it. So it's still going to use your phone camera to take the light reading, but it will convert it to PPFD. And it's pre-programmed with various light sources. That's mostly what the in-app features for purchase are. So if you want to purchase an LED calculation, if you want to purchase the fluorescent calculation, I think like daylight out in the sun is free, and then you have to buy the extra ones. But either one of these are perfectly fine. They will measure the brightness, but then you can convert that with some math into an energy reading. But you do need to know what kind of light you are growing under in order to make an accurate conversion. Speaking of lighting fixtures, how do we evaluate grow light fixtures? I'm not going to tell you which light to buy, but I will give you some tips for choosing a light fixture. How do you decide which one is going to work for you? The first thing you want to look at is the light output. How much energy is produced? Certain fixtures will tell you their output in brilliance, in lumens, and those are mostly the household fixtures. If you look at your light bulbs that you buy for your kitchen or bathroom, they're going to rate in lumens. And again, that's brilliance because that light is intended for humans. We want to be able to read our newspaper or look at the recipe that we're working with in the kitchen. If the light output is given in PPFD, that photosynthetic photon flux density, that's going to be a light fixture designed for grow lights. Now you can certainly use many household light fixtures or light fixtures for growing plants, but if you specifically want to look for a plant light that has been designed for plant growth, you want something that tells you the energy output because that's what the plants are interested in. You can find that here on this picture I've got on the side. This one is a very high output light. It is marketed to homeowners, but for homeowners who want to do some indoor growing of leafy greens or other crops. You also want to know the input. How much energy is that plant going to use? Now, in this case, you're probably going to not be able to plug this fixture into a typical home outlet. It takes 680 watts of energy. So you're going to need a higher capacity electrical outlet for this one. You want to know the efficiency of the plant. How much, or how the efficiency of the light. How much energy in light are you going to get for energy in electricity that you put in? This one gives you 2.55 micromoles of light for every joule of electricity, which is actually quite good. The very most efficient LED fixtures on the market, the new ones, are up to about 3.2 micromoles per joule. But this is perfectly good. One of the reasons this one's a little bit lower is that it has a broader spectrum, and that reduces the energy conversion. You may also want to look at color. If you're growing particular crops, if you want to grow for fruit and flowering, you're going to want to pay attention to the color of the light. Plants photosynthesize best in blue and red, and you can see the peaks in the blue and the red there in that color spectrum at the bottom. But this particular fixture offers a little bit more mid-range. It's more comfortable to work under. We saw those blue lights where things looked really dim, and it can be hard to work under those. So if you're looking for a light fixture you want to bring into your home, you may want something that gives you a more white light. But keep in mind that you do want reds and blues for good photosynthesis and energy for the plants. But you may also want some other pigments because those can influence flowering. Reds in particular, you may want a little more red if you're looking for flowering and fruiting plants. And red is where plants photosynthesize the best. Blue after that, but blue also helps keep plants compact. If we just grow under red light, even though that's the best for photosynthesis, the plants tend to get stretched out. So that's why we also give them a good amount of blue light. It helps to keep them compact and keep them from getting leggy. Other thing to look at is the lifespan of the fixture. A fluorescent fixture is going to last you, well, the bulb itself, the fixture will be long-term, but the bulb itself will last you about 12,000 hours. And if you're running 16 to 18-hour days, that'll last you about 3 years before it needs to be replaced. One of the benefits of LED fixtures is they do last much longer, but you will have to replace the entire fixture after 7 or 8 years. Whereas with a fluorescent, you'll just be replacing the individual bulb, not the whole light. The LED, the light output, is a diode. It's part of a circuit. So the whole fixture is going to have to be replaced at that point. And that's a big amount of money. So some people still choose to go with fluorescents because they're cheaper to begin with and they are easier to replace. It's much less expensive to replace them. With a fluorescent, you may want to look for the HO or VHO. This is high output or very high output. Those are stronger, have higher energy in their output. So that's something you may want to look for. For those specific types of plants that I mentioned earlier, seedlings, cuttings, microgreens, these are very young plants. They're very small, and they need only a medium or a moderate amount of light, just a little bit more than is available in most of our homes. You might also be able to get this much in a very sunny south-facing window, but often when we put plants in a south-facing window and they're young and they're growing fast, one reason we may not want to just rely on natural light is that they will tend to stretch out and curve, kind of bend toward the light source. So adding a supplemental light can be beneficial. If you're looking at a fluorescent light, as I said, blues will encourage good foliage color and compact growth. And because you're not looking to flower or fruit these particular plants, you won't really need to worry about the more broad spectrum. So a broad spectrum grow light that has a more warm red color can be beneficial, but it's not necessary for seedlings or cuttings. These microgreens aren't going to be looking for those particular colors of light. So a more blue colored fluorescent light is perfectly fine for some of these very young plants. You can invest in LEDs. Red and a mix of red and blue, as I said, gives you the best growth. They are an expensive option. So if you're looking at LEDs, look for a product with a 5-year warranty at least. They're much, much better than they were 5 and especially 10 years ago. But if I'm buying an LED fixture, I'm going to look for something that has a good warranty on it, because we still get products on the market that aren't as good as other ones, and you want to know that the company's going to stand behind their product. I purchased 30 new LED fixtures for the greenhouse that I manage, and I was not at all surprised that I have had some of them fail. Now, obviously, it hasn't been 50,000 hours yet. The LEDs are still perfectly good, the light output, but the drivers that are incorporated into them tend to have a much shorter lifespan. So I've already used the product warranties on the LEDs that I have bought. So it's just a caution. They're expensive, they're good fixtures, but you want to purchase a product that you know the company is going to stand behind. I do not recommend incandescent lights for seedlings and small cuttings. They give off a lot of heat, not as much light energy, and you can't put them very close to the plants because they will burn them and crisp them. So incandescent lights are just not recommended for seedlings, cuttings, or microgreens, those small plants. My recommendations for medium light plants like leafy greens, you're going to need higher light intensity, more energy, but roughly the same. Fluorescents with blue lights are good. We really don't need the reds, and LEDs with a red-blue mix. So similar recommendation, you'll just look for something with a higher output. If you are interested in flowering and fruiting plants, as I said, if you want to grow citrus or tomatoes, you're going to look for very, very high light, above 3,000 foot candles, and 400 to 800 PPFD if you're looking at that measurement. For fluorescence, definitely make sure that you purchase a light that has a high output or a very high output note on it. And here you will want a broader spectrum. You're going to want the reds as well as the blues. LEDs, again, you either need to put them closer to the plants or look for something with a stronger power source. In this case, you may find incandescents are useful, but as a supplement to other types of light. The incandescent isn't going to give you the energy. It's just going to give you those warm red wavelengths that certain plants need for flowering or fruiting. This chrysanthemum here has to have red light to flower, actually far red light, and that it can get from an incandescent. It's not always available from fluorescent or all LED light fixtures. If you're looking to just supplement some light for your houseplants, maybe you have some plants that are getting a little leggy or stretched, or you have windows that are shaded, or you want to put something in an interior room, fluorescent with blues are great. If you're looking to get your plants to flower, I'd recommend a more broad spectrum light. Same thing for the LEDs. And incandescent, again, you may want to consider red for some of that flowering. If you're not sure if you need more light for your plants, here are some signs that you have some low light issues. Stretching in your plants, as I said, loss of variegation in the leaves. So if you have a plant that has a variegation or should have some striping or some multicolored leaves, and they're just turning green, that's often an indicator that you don't have enough light. If the plant should be flowering and isn't, it's not getting enough energy to do that reproduction. Low light houseplants, you're probably fine in most homes. Very low light houseplants like snake plants and some of our Araceae like pothos, they'll do fine in a north window or an interior room. Medium light plants, these are our peace lilies, anthuriums. They need a little more light. An east-facing window at least is better for them, or if you don't have that, you may need to add some light. And very high light plants, a south or a west window. I have a croton at home. I have really good light, but I still lose the variegation because even in my south-facing window, it's just not enough light. Here are some resources. Again, that website for converting lux to PPFD. And at the very bottom, Gardening Under Lights is a book. It's just a few years old, and it's a very good the beginner's guide to gardening under lights, to growing indoors. So if you want more in depth on some of the things that I've introduced you to very quickly here, I definitely recommend this book. So if you want to know more, you can. But I really want to stop here and answer any questions that you have.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And we did put those resources into the chat and those links. So I want to encourage people to check out your chat. We will also post those links to those resources with the recording. Anne has posted a link to where you can find that recording. If you want to watch this program again, it will be posted in a few days once we have it ready. So you can review the material or share it with a friend and watch the video on YouTube. Also, we have an evaluation link in the chat, so please fill that out. It will also pop up when we close the program. We did have some questions come in and we do have a few minutes. So let's see here. One question came in. I know you were just covering houseplants. Do you have a resource or a guide, or maybe it's in one of the resources you mentioned about a guide for the range for specific houseplants for lighting?
My favorite houseplant book is The Houseplant Expert by D.G. Hessan. And he won't give you specific, say, lux or foot candle readings, but he will say, medium, high, or low light. So that, yeah, I've got that one up there too. So that will basically tell you if it's a low, medium, or a high light requiring plant.
Yes.
So that's a really good one. And I think the Gardening Under Lights book that I recommended also has some specifics toward the back of, particular plants and how to grow them.
Great. I know you mentioned a couple of apps for your cell phone. Would you mind just mentioning those again?
I didn't mention any specific ones. The one that I showed a picture of, that is just called Light Meter. As I said, they are recommended for photographers. So you can just go and find one. I don't have a specific one that I recommend. But if you are interested in one that is more professional, look for more like of a grow meter as opposed to a light meter, which is going to be marketed toward photographers.
Okay.
So
we have some individuals that are using the LE tubes, but in a shop fixture. I know you kind of mentioned with LEDs, the caution with the drivers that those can fail. And she mentioned that they're flickering or shutting off. Do you have an idea of what might be happening with that kind of setup?
it's probably going to be your driver, and that is the part that fails. So the LEDs, the light emitting diode that is the circuit, usually they're pretty good, and that's not what fails first. It's often the driver. There's really no easy fix. If your product has a warranty, call the manufacturer, and if they're any good, they will replace it promptly. So that's the difficulty with LEDs, is that you can't just swap out a light bulb. You've got to replace the whole fixture, and it's not cheap, so it can be frustrating.
Right. I want to sneak one more question in right before we close, just because we were talking a lot about LED. Are there any cautions for our own eyes or our skin? Do we, does somebody need to wear sunscreen if they have LEDs going?
Not from LEDs. One of the benefits of LEDs is they have a very narrow spectrum. So while fluorescents, if they break, you've got the risk of mercury exposure. LEDs are much safer products. So you don't have that hazardous material risk that you have with a fluorescent. And the spectrum is very, very narrow. Unless you particularly purchase a UV LED, you're not going to have to risk UV exposure. You, of course, don't want to look directly at the light source because it's going to, burn your retinas. But you should not have to be worried about burn exposure.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Johanna. As always, you are a delight to have on our program and so knowledgeable. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.